Okay, we're now live. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the special open board meeting for today. We are focused on budget. I want to start us off, first of all, by recognizing and acknowledging both the Esquimalt and Songhees nations on whose traditional territories we live, we learn, and we do our work. Trustees, may I have a mover to approve this evening's agenda? Thank you, Trustee Bio, and a seconder. Thank you, Trustee Gagnon. Any discussion, any changes or amendments to the agenda? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you, trustees. All right, so we have one item on our agenda under B1, Budget Working Groups 2024-2025 Annual Budget Recommendations. I'm going to turn things over to the Secretary Treasurer, if you wouldn't mind walking us through your memo.
Thank you, Chair. So the memo included in the agenda package is just a little overview of how the budget working groups came about, the meetings that were held, and then finally the recommendations for the 2024-2025 annual budget. So the budget working groups came about as at the November 27th special open budget meeting where the board approved the 24-25 budget development process. And that included the creation of these 3 budget working groups. If you were involved in the process or recall from last year, the model included a budget advisory committee, which was a large group with lots of members participating. And this year we broke it up into 3 smaller groups so that there could be more focused discussion. And the 3 groups were allocated into areas of focus. One of them looked at department budgets, one at school-based budgets, and the other at special purpose fund budgets. Included in the memo is a link to the district website where you can take a look at the terms of reference. Each of the groups has their own terms of reference. So the budget working groups met. We attempted to meet all in person. We had one meeting where we had to go online due to the weather. But each of the groups met in the Tolme office building and in separate rooms. And prior to each meeting, there were information packages that were prepared by financial services, Julie and Hervinder, and sent to each of the groups so they could read in advance. And then in the meeting, reviewed the information and explored other questions or curiosities. So there were 5 meetings that were held. The first one started on December 13th. And we did join together as a larger group at that meeting, and we looked at budget scope, budget responsibility, the operating surplus, and the structural deficit. And then we broke out into the smaller groups. We did a similar thing at the second meeting on January 18th. In that larger group, we looked at historical spending, outside funding and contracts and ratios, and then broke out into the smaller groups. The third, fourth, and fifth meetings, we just went straight into our small groups as the groups continued to explore different options. The department working group, you'll notice, had 3 different areas or 4 different areas that it was looking at. So it looked specifically at international education, with the attendance of Dr. Jeff Davis, who's the director, and also Indigenous education with Dr. Shelley Nemi and the members of the Indigenous community, and inclusive learning with District Principal Sean McCartney, and also multi-language learners with District Principal David Hovis. So I think we all learned a lot in those meetings as we explored a lot of different information and allocations at the district level and also at the school-based level. On January 29th, I'll mention there was a sort of an interim update that was provided to the board on the work of these committees, but this evening we're focusing on the recommendations that have come out of each of the budget working groups. If you were to look at the terms of reference, you'll see that these groups are based on consensus, and two of the three groups were not able to reach consensus on a single recommendations from the entire group, but there were ideas that came forward from individuals or group of individuals who were participating in that group. So the first one we'll look at is the Department Budget Working Group. This is one of the groups that did not reach consensus, but we've included in the memo recommendations that have been made from participants in that group. The first one is related to international education. And the recommendations are to staff FTE to student ratio, the staff FTE to student ratio to continue to be the same as for resident students as per the Board of Education's direction during the 23-24 budget process. Staff to identify possible fee increases. Staff to confirm the additional revenue anticipated from the 24-25 tuition fee increase of $500 per student. Staff to recommend possible use of this additional revenue, and board to give direction on how these funds will be allocated. Staff to provide recommendations regarding permanent reductions in department operating costs. Staff to provide the board with a recommendation regarding a further tuition increase for the 25-26 school year. Staff to provide the board with a report detailing the costs associated with providing school district facilities for the international program, including but not limited to building maintenance and repair, utilities, supplies, furnishings, training, etc. So that was one recommendation. And then also under international education, there was another recommendation. This one recommendation was made to enable a sustainable international education program and to ensure that the International Education Department will not operate in a deficit for either 23-24 or 24-25. The recommendations are to identify fee increases for the 24-25 school year, including tuition and any other program fees, to identify staffing reductions, and to continue to explore operating efficiencies. And then there was one recommendation regarding English language learning, and it is in recognition of the expansion of the program and workload, including the opening of the Welcome Center and increase in ELL students, move an additional 0.20 FTE of the district principal multi-language learners, mental health, and multiculturalism into the ELL operating budget. Chair, would you like me to just go through all of them and then have questions, or one at a time?
I think one at a time might be best, just so that we can kind of focus on their areas of focus.
And I'll just acknowledge too that there are a lot of people who are here tonight who participated in these various groups. So I'm not sure if anyone would want to speak on behalf, but I will pass that back to you, Chair, then to address any questions.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Appreciate you walking us through the memo thus far. So we've heard what's come out of the department budget working group, and so really tonight is an opportunity for us to have some dialogue for folks to speak to any of the recommendations if you wish. But again, there's no pressure if you don't wish to. So what we would normally do is open the floor to our partners around the table first and foremost. And so that's what I'm going to start with. So for the partners around the table, if there's anything that you would like to offer in the way of comments, questions, observations, now's the time. Okay. And then again, I just want to offer trustees around the table an opportunity to do the same if you wish. And if not, then I will move things back to the Secretary Treasurer and we can keep working our way through the memo. I'll open the floor again at the end as well, just in case folks want to come back to anything that came out of either of the three working groups. Okay, all right, Secretary Treasurer, would you help us work through the next working group's recommendations?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The school-based budget working group was the next group. This is another group that did not reach consensus on recommendations. However, this group gathered recommendations from all of the participants and also added along comments to provide additional context for trustees to inform their deliberations and decision making. So starting off with a recommendation to determine what are needs versus wants in the district. What is needed just to educate students and keep the buildings functioning? Technology technically is not funded except for students who need it. For example, assisted speech technology. And when it is needed by students, the schools pay for it out of their budgets. Music was mentioned as a want, not a need. It's noted as a huge part of curriculum for students. Wondering as to what would be the cost to mental health if music were cut. Cuts to music costs is teachers, less teachers for students. And music is a part of the curriculum. However, the music under discussion is over and above the curriculum requirement. The next section is, the next recommendation is to think about the most vulnerable kids and who they see in the day. Those are the people most crucial, as well as the student space environment. Picture it. No one staff member is more important than the other. You take one away, someone else has to pick up the jobs. How much is it costing principals to do jobs versus custodians, counselors, EAs, etc.? If this is emergency time, guard those in schools as best as you can. The next recommendation is that, or question is, carry forwards in schools are not people or staff. Is it possible to save money by reducing this? Comments under that section include maintenance and repairs to the interior of school buildings quite often come from the school-based budget, not always from facilities. There are general guidelines of what schools cover from their own funds, but these can get complicated and specifics are sometimes tricky to navigate. The general idea is that if something is already part of the building and needs repair, then typically facilities would pay. If it is something the school needs that is new, like sinks, or not a fixed part of the building, like chairs, tables, cupboards, blinds, appliances, then the cost usually goes to the school. Carry forward is contingency to be used to fix things in schools. The reduction to 25,000 to 40,000. So they're referring to the maximum allowable carry forward in schools is just allowing schools to meet needs. There's no contingency for larger repairs and maintenance such as photocopiers, painting, shelving, blinds, etc. We will have some schools that run out of money in March. Would rather decrease the carry forwards than decrease another person in the school, even though it would be hard to manage supplies with a decrease. It is uncomfortable, but that is the lowest amount we can make ends meet with. And we are a very lean organization. We are barely making ends meet, and we are finding creative ways to do it. The next comment is mentorship and orientation programs work. The best prody for teachers is teachers working together. Saves the district money in investigations, people going on leave. Admin are dealing with issues. Maybe another admin has already solved and can share their experience, which will save time and energy. And we tend to silo. So if we have 47 sites, undoubtedly that happens. Collaboration reduces siloing. If it means release time, it could be expensive. Orientation saves the district time and money. The cost to the district is TTOCs calling payroll to read pay stubs and other district staff for information. Can save on investigations. Same with the EAs, especially for out of province folks who do not know policies, curriculum, culture, and even if it's just money for a slideshow. And their last comment is don't see many areas as far as staffing that can be cut. The only way we're going to save money is on supplies of some kind. Perhaps we could apply an economy of scale among the lower districts, Souk and Saanich. We have equipment that we use, but not at the same time. Could we share it? Shared purchasing power. Buying less quality furniture and supplies does not save in the long run, doesn't last long. And those are the comments from the school-based budget working group.
Thank you very much, Secretary Treasurer. All right. I'm going to again first open the floor to our partners around the table. If you have any comments or questions or anything you would like to highlight at this point, feel free to. Yeah, Ilda, welcome. The floor is yours when you're ready.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to say that we talked at length around what was happening at schools, and school budgets are really, really tight. And just to emphasize how connected and integrated everything is in our schools, everything will affect our students and what happens in the schools, whether we're talking about people, resources, programming, all of that impacts our students.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to, any of our partners? And then I'll open the floor for trustees. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands. So I'm opening the floor for trustees, and Trustee Kwan, you go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say what a great, a lovely time I had with my group. It was really fulsome discussion and some, really great learning that came out of the discussions. So thank you to everyone. I also just wanted to mention that part of the reason we didn't reach consensus was not because it's really because we didn't focus on reaching consensus on certain recommendations. We focused on making sure that everyone's voice was heard. So that's really where we went from here. And so I didn't want anyone to think that we were in disagreement at all. It was more about getting all of the ideas out there than it was about reaching consensus.
Thank you, Trustee Kwan. No, I think that's a lovely way to focus your time together. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, we often think when we don't reach consensus that somehow that's a negative thing, but it, doesn't have to be, right? Okay, so trustees, yeah, Trustee Gagnon, go ahead.
Sure. There's a note in the mentorship and orientation programs work that I thought was actually an interesting and relevant thing that we're dealing with, and that one was around the save the district and money investigators, people going on leave with the Pro D element, and what we know with how much we are spending on TTOCs in the past few years alone in the millions of dollars that we are seeing that aren't really being funded by the province. If we can find ways where we're spending, $50,000 to save us $1 million later on, it's something that I think we have to be looking at. What specifically is that fix that I just came up with off the top of my head? I don't know, but I'm certainly open ears to hearing how we can take steps that may cost us a little bit in the short term, but are going to save us over time, because we know, especially in the aftermath of the pandemic, that we are seeing teachers rightfully and yeah, rightfully take time off when they need it. And I'm not going to come out here and say like that they're not entitled to it and they don't deserve it. They do. So how can we put systems in place to lessen that amount and make sure that it's a healthy and safe working environment that also isn't costing the district a lot of money?
Thank you, Trustee Gagnon. Trustee Kwan, go ahead.
I think I've probably said this before, but I'll say it again because I think it's important for us to keep in mind, that there's new legislation around sick days that came into place not so long ago. And of course, we're seeing that, being taken advantage of. And so it should be, just shouldn't have to be coming sick to work, or, any staff in our district shouldn't be having to come sick to work. However, we didn't see any additional funding at all for that piece of legislation. And, along with a lot of other pieces of legislation, we didn't see funding for. So just wanted to put that out there.
The need for more provincial funding. I think that might be a theme that we explore further during our budget process, I suspect. Okay. Any other trustees wish to speak to the second budget working group's recommendations? I just wanted to note my own appreciation for some of the additional sort of context and thoughts that were shared in addition to the recommendations for us to consider as we move forward. Yeah, I found that interesting, and in terms of supplies and other opportunities outside of staffing, for us to look at efficiencies or potentially opportunities from a procurement perspective to, maximize our purchasing power. We are a large employer and we are a large purchaser of stuff. And so perhaps there are some other efficiencies that we could glean from looking at that. I also was noted that some of the facilities related and the maintenance and repair aspects of how schools are having to balance those competing interests with other services that they are also funding. I'm hopeful that we can start to look at that system wide, perhaps not through the budget process, but certainly through the long range facilities planning that we need to do, and how we might be more efficient and take some of that burden off of schools and look to centralize that, and again look to potential efficiencies. So yeah, just wanted to share my thoughts on that. Trustees, any other thoughts that came to you as you read through the recommendations from this particular budget working group? Okay. All right. Well, thank you to the members of the school-based budget working group. We appreciate it. Secretary Treasurer Stride, would you mind working us through the last group's recommendations?
So the last group we'll look at is the Special Purpose Fund Budget Working Group. This group was able to reach consensus on recommendations. This group reviewed the special purpose funds and focused in on one special purpose fund called Community Link, as it was the only fund that really had the flexibility to realign services. And so by consensus, the following recommendations were put forward. To use 500,000 of the 24-25 Community Link funding to realign services from operating funding. And then to use 120,000 of unspent 23-24 community link funding to realign services from operating funding in 24-25. I'll just add to that, like the community link budget is made up of a lot of different items. And so in these recommendations, the group chose to go with a dollar amount instead of identifying specific items within that budget, but further recommendations could be made by staff on what would make sense in that. And when it says realign services, essentially what would happen is that items, expenses would be removed from community link, and expenses would be moved out of operating into community link, which would create a surplus in operating that we can put towards the structural or the budget deficit for next year. And the same thing with the carry forward. So it's the carry forward is basically moved into next year. It's not allocated to anything, and operating expenses are transferred over to community link to release a budget in operating, and again can be used to address the budget deficit. So hopefully that makes sense.
Realignment is what I took from from that. Potential opportunities to realign. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, so again, I want to open the floor first to our partners. If there's anything that you would like to comment on or any questions you have in relation to the recommendation from this budget working group. Yeah, Nissa, hi, go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, I've clicked all the buttons. I should be ready. I just want to say, like, one, recognizing this difficult situation, and I'm not sure what the solution is around, because there's not enough money to adjust all the things that need to be addressed. Acknowledging that fact, my mind turns to how do you strategize about, yeah, there's going to be pain in the short term because there's no good options at this point, given, you know, what we've heard from all of our partners around the table about how hard everyone is working to try and support the best quality education in the face of rising costs, and rightly so. You know, people taking the time off work and doing their best to find the good prices on things. So like, what, figuring out a strategy of how do we put pressure where pressure needs to be applied to message out that this is an untenable situation, that cuts are no longer possible, because it seems like the reward for finding economies and doing our best to maintain quality of service for our student body and for our communities is more cuts. And that's not necessarily a that's not a reaction that that's not a reaction that I think we want to encourage. So I guess my mind is turning to, how do we turn that around so that it becomes clear to people who are in positions to allocate more funds to the districts in order to provide the education that our students and our families deserve, that there are no more cuts to be made. Anyways, just a thought, thinking of like, okay, we've identified the problems. How do we strategize for better outcomes in the future? Anyways, thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you very much. No, I appreciate your comments. Yeah, and I think we're going to be talking about that along with having to make some very difficult decisions about how we address the shortfall. Big piece of advocacy work to do, but we have a provincial election coming, so that might help us in some respects. Okay. Any other partners around the table wish to speak to budget and the work of the working group? Okay, I'm going to open the floor to trustees. Trustee Kwan, you want to kick us off? Go ahead.
Far be it from me to stop the rant that I'm on. I would just echo Nissa's comments too. I mean, you know, we've been making tough cuts for several years already, and that's going to continue happening. I don't see an end to it. I just don't. And you know, as costs increase, we're just going to have to make more cuts. And so at some point, something's got to give. So I agree. I think, you know, we can all do our part to be advocates in our own way. But yeah, something definitely has to go here. You know, we're getting to the point where, you know, not only are we a lean organization, but we're just not providing the services that we should be.
Okay, so yeah, we did, so last year, we advocated to the province for additional funding, and one of the things we highlighted when we did so was the sort of inflationary cost pressures that we anticipated that we would be dealing with, and were dealing with at the time, but that has only been magnified by the realities of the actuals. And so we certainly have much more data that we can provide to the province to support our advocacy efforts moving forward. You know, we can be very specific about some of those pressures and the impacts that they are having and will continue to have. So yeah, there's an opportunity, I think, to do some very effective advocacy, and especially given that there seems to be a genuine will around the table to work collaboratively to do that together as a learning community, which is really wonderful to see. Trustees, does anybody else have any other comments in relation to our agenda tonight, or comments in general about budget? I know this is just the beginning. We've got many more meetings to come, and certainly more opportunities to have further dialogue. Anything else that anybody wants to highlight in respect to the working groups, or things that you want trustees to particularly pay attention to as we consider the recommendations from the groups? Trustee Gagnon, sorry, go ahead. I missed you.
Thank you, Chair. I just put up my hand, so it's all good. I just wanted to give thanks to the different departments that came to present to the department budget working group. The district principals in particular that came, gave their time, gave their notes and effort to answer any and all questions that we had for them. Dr. Davis, Dr. Nemi, Principal McCartney, Principal Hovis, all of them stepped up and answered the tough questions and the easy questions. So I just wanted to thank them, as well as just the members of that particular working group, because that was mine. So I can thank them as best I can. And then in terms of budget, we're in a tough way. And there's no easy way around it. It's to the point where I advocate any way I can to the province, including opening my mouth right now saying that we are in a budgetary position that is unsustainable. We could maybe possibly likely balance this year's budget. I don't see a way where we're doing next year's. That's where we're at. And it's sometimes saying the quiet part out loud, that if the funding model doesn't change, that the quality of education for the students of the Greater Victoria School District is going to be drastically affected for the worse. So without the province actually backing up some of their policies with actual financial commitments, we're in trouble. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Gagnon. Yeah, and I think in saying that, I also want to acknowledge the reality that many other school districts across our province are also facing these same pressures and same constraints. So yeah, I think there's some opportunities here to do some more advocacy. Any other thoughts, Secretary Treasurer? Was there anything else in terms of the memo from your perspective that you wanted to highlight, or any comments that you wanted to make?
I don't really have any further comments on the memo itself. I would, if it's okay, I wouldn't mind taking the opportunity just to mention that we have a couple of more budget events that are coming up. Invites have gone out and come back for talking tables, which is next Thursday. That's an event where we are gathering with the rights holders and our education partners and discussing some important topics. And then the following Thursday on the 14th, we will have a public budget meeting in person. It's currently scheduled to be at Spectrum, I believe, but further information will be sent out on that. So just to keep that in mind if you're interested in participating in those.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Appreciate the reminders. Looking forward to those events. Okay. So we are at that part in our agenda under C, question period. I will turn to the Deputy Superintendent just to check in to see if there are any questions.
No questions.
Thank you very much.
Through the chair, no questions.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, and so that brings us to adjournment. Thank you for being here, folks. We appreciate it. Look forward to seeing some of you, if not all of you, in person very, very soon, and back around the table for further discussions as everything unfolds budget-wise. Trustees, may I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Trustee Gagnon, and a seconder. Thank you, Trustee Kwan. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thanks, folks. Good night.